You practically broke your arm patting yourself on the back for not voting in January to just eliminate the AHCA. You told us that that was because you didn't think that healthcare could be solved in a couple of months. It's too complicated. It took you 3 weeks. 3 weeks to go from it's too complicated and it can't be done quickly to I've got a huge pile of excrement that the CBO said was going to kick 24 million people off of health insurance. 3 weeks, Congressman. That's all it took for you to go from I'm not going to do it that quickly to I've got a yes vote in my pocket and I'm going to use it. You have been the single greatest threat to my family in the entire world. You are the reason I stay up at night. What happens if I lose my job? My wife, who every day is wondering if she's going to get cancer, now also has to contend with, what if my husband loses his job? If I lose my job, we can't afford COBRA. We can't afford to get private insurance. We get it from my employer. If I lose it, it's gone. If I lose my job on a Monday, if I'm lucky enough to find a job on a Tuesday, which never happens, I will not be eligible for 3 to 6 months. If I lapse my coverage within 63 days, suddenly I'm in a high-risk pool. Come after me, I don't care. You came after my wife. You came after my kids. Your actions affect the entire country. There is no one in this country that your actions are not going to affect. Well, there was a horrible bill available to you from a horrible group of people who believe that we don't deserve health insurance. They have said it on TV, on camera. They said it. They said that if we get sick, it's our fault. These are the people that are in your party, that you're working with. I will not forgive. I will not forget. The single payer run by the government, oh yeah, it's got problems, but it's also got elections, and you're going to find that out in 2018.
Normally, Luane and I try to pick an audio clip to lead into these broadside commentaries that directly relates to the topic at hand. If you were listening to the powerful words of one terrified and angry husband and father, you might think I'm going to go on a tear about healthcare. Maybe I should. But the issue that has animated my thinking the most this week is just something I need to get off my chest. It all started with a series of tweets courtesy of MSNBC's Joy Reid. Quote, Bernie and his followers are like that college friend who stays at your place for weeks, pays $0, eats your food, and trashes your aesthetic. Not saying they're not welcome to move in. I'm sure the party would welcome them. But for now, they're that long-term couch friend. Joy is not the lone figure among the so-called progressive left that has been targeting Bernie Sanders as of late. We keep an active Twitter account for Swing State, and I can confirm that rarely a day goes by where I don't see some supposedly left-leaning individuals going after Sanders or his supporters. And worse, if you dare to point out the naked absurdity of their claims, you're likely to find yourself blocked by the very same people who will then turn around and lament the infighting they themselves are fueling within the left. I admit that even as an atheist, the first thing that comes to my mind is that one bit of advice Jesus gave about removing the plank from your own eye before removing the speck of dust from your brother's eye. I consider myself a peacemaker, and if I may blow my own bagpipe for a moment, I do in fact have the street cred to claim that. I supported Bernie Sanders for president during the 2016 primaries. I canvassed, I phone banked, I donated, I spread the word, and did basically everything that is in the power of one working class person to do to see his campaign succeed. And do you know what happened? Bernie lost. That's right. He lost. I didn't blame the scoreboard, or the Clintons, or the media that went out of its way to ignore Sanders while faithfully covering every second of every fucking Trump rally, or the Democratic Party elites, even though I probably could have, considering that the Democratic primary was designed to be a coronation, not a race. Not one heavy hitter in the Democratic Party establishment bothered to run, if for no other reason than to set the stage for 2020 and soak up millions of dollars worth of free TV exposure. The candidates that did challenge her, however briefly, were endlessly characterized as hopelessly outclassed in terms of money and organization. Good for little more than a tune-up before the big show. Suffice to say, Sanders and his legions came out of nowhere and briefly put the fear of God into the Clinton camp, but he, and we, came up short. We lost. So do you know what I did? I took all of my disappointment, set it aside, and did the same thing for Hillary Clinton that I did for Bernie Sanders. I donated, made calls, and made the argument to people in my state that Hillary Clinton was not only the best option available to us, but her policies would directly benefit the majority of Iowans, especially those with disabilities. Because it was true. And then do you know what happened? She lost. That's right. She lost. Hillary Clinton and all her mega-rich donors and establishment friends fumbled the football on the 1-yard line when they should have been dancing into the end zone. She lost to Donald grab-him-by-the-pussy Trump, the stupidest, least qualified alleged sexual predator to ever seek high office in our nation. It should have been unlosable, a political grenada. After all, the nation was ready for Hillary, right? It was supposed to be her turn, her time, right? But she choked. Her campaign pulled resources from the Midwest, and she lost the Electoral College thanks to states like Michigan and Iowa. She lost. And what has been the response of Hillary and her supporters since that fateful November day? So far as I can see, it's been to blame everyone but Hillary. It was the Bernie bros, you see. It was the media. It was the Russians. Look, it's not like she doesn't sort of have a point here, at least about the latter two, but like I said in a previous episode about the upper echelons of college football, when you're in a leadership position, taking accountability is not optional. When you fail, you own it. Then shut up. If you don't do that, you start to reveal the very lack of focus and leadership qualities that as much as anything else caused you to fail in the first place. Luane and I cover the Russiagate scandal almost every week, but even we have the presence of mind to know that Vladimir Putin never expected Trump to win. The operation he ordered was meant to hobble her presidency and divide our already divided nation. But every day I check Twitter, and there's another Clintonite slamming Sanders, claiming he's the real reason for her loss. And worse, now he's trashing the Democratic Party. Yeah, mean old Bernie. Just look at how he trashes your aesthetic when describing the state of the Democratic Party.
Democrats actually have the momentum, maybe not enough momentum right now to win in heavily Republican districts, but the momentum is with the Democrats. But having said that, it is my view that the Democratic Party has to do a lot of internal soul searching and understand that for the last 10 years, the model that they have had really has not worked. And I think that what the Democrats have got to do is make it clear to the working people of this country that the Democratic Party is on their side, is prepared to take on Wall Street, the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance company, the fossil fuel industry, to create the many millions of jobs that we can create by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, by in fact passing a Medicare for all single-payer system.
Dear God. The horror. If you paid any attention to what Bernie just said, you already realize it's about as controversial as saying that water is fucking wet. Maybe it's time you started listening to the progressive left instead of excuse peddling, because you don't get to claim Sanders and his energized supporters, the lone hope of this party, something even Chuck Schumer realized, are like college bums criticizing the wallpaper, when in fact, Sanders supporters are more like the loyal, honest friends telling you your fucking apartment is on fire while you're standing around in the kitchen baking cookies. You don't get to claim your candidate is blameless when she loses the easiest race in the modern history of the United States, and you don't get to claim she ran a good campaign when no living person to this day can even tell you what the fuck it was about. And this is really the problem, or one of them, with the present-day Sanders critic. You're in a position where you ought to have vanishingly little to say, yet you can't stop with the hate in the shade. For myself, I have no interest in relitigating the 2016 primaries or the general election or figuring out exactly who is to blame for what. I am willing to put aside all of that for one very good reason. We don't have the fucking luxury of self-cannibalizing. We need every single person we can get, from left-leaning Republicans to moderate Democrats to the most progressive Sandernistas, to join together in one force, first to resist this abomination of a presidency, and then to start the slow work of rebuilding our democracy, which is at this very moment under assault by a crazed orange tyrant and the anti-democratic Republican cartel that has enabled him every step of the way. We have bigger things to worry about, like the man you just heard dressing down his representative. These people are coming after Medicaid. That's a fancy way of saying they're coming after the poor, the sick, the old, and the disabled. We should be saving every ounce of our ammunition for the Republican mafia, and the sooner the rightfully disappointed Clinton supporters accept that Bernie Sanders is in no way your problem and close ranks, the better off we're all going to be.
The sleep of reason brings forth monsters.
I'm a whiner, and I keep whining and whining until I win. maybe somebody will rise up.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty.
Welcome to Swing State, an aggressive, progressive, critical, and political podcast from the middle of the Midwest. Hi, welcome back to Swing State. I'm Wayne.
I'm AJ.
And we still live in a world with Donald Trump as president. The Senate has finally released a draft of their plan for health care, and fireworks are legal in Iowa, so we've got that going for us. So I guess we'll find out how good the health care is here pretty soon.
At least you have some incendiary devices to shoot at your congressman.
We don't advocate shooting fireworks.
Those Roman candles have some real range, though, that's all I'm saying. Just to take you guys right into the meat of the discussion, I'm going to read to you from a New York Times article called Senate Health Bill Reels as CBO Predicts 22 Million More Uninsured. The Senate bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act was edging toward collapse on Monday after the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said it would increase the number of people without health insurance by 22 million by 2026. Two Republicans, Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Rand Paul of Kentucky, said Monday that they would vote against even debating the health care bill, joining Senator Dean Heller of Nevada, who made the same pledge on Friday. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin hinted that he, too, would probably oppose taking up the bill on a procedural vote expected as early as Tuesday, meaning a collapse would be imminent. Quote, "It's worse to pass a bad bill than to pass no bill," end quote, Mr. Paul told reporters. Ms. Collins wrote on Twitter on Monday evening that she wanted to work with her colleagues from both parties to fix flaws in the Affordable Care Act, but that the Budget Office's report showed that the, quote, "Senate bill won't do it." The report left Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, with the unenviable choices of changing senators' stated positions, withdrawing the bill from consideration while he renegotiates, or letting it go down to defeat. A remarkable conclusion to the Republicans' 7-year push to repeal President Barack Obama's signature domestic achievement. So we had the discussion before, Luane and I did, at least a couple of times, both on mic and off, when the House originally proposed their version of Trump Care, and it was an absolute disaster. It was something that it spawned opposition like the clip you heard at the beginning of the show. It sent waves of anger flowing across the country. And the thing that we were told, if you'll recall, is that they were going to send this over to the Senate, and the Senate was going to work on it. In fact, they were looking forward to work on it because they were going to really polish it over and smooth everything out. They were going to take out most of the draconian measures. Well, come to find out, that, like everything the Republicans say, is a fucking lie.
The thing about that, first of all, why the fuck should we have to wait for the Senate to get a hold of it to fix the fucking bill? That's what the House is for. They're supposed to send them shit. And the Senate maybe can refine it, or should refine it, and kick it back, and whatever else. But to basically rely on the Senate to do the dirty work is basically what they were doing. One of the recent revelations, since they finally released a draft copy of the bill, because enough people bitched about them doing everything in secret, like the shady fucks they are, their revised version of that bill includes, essentially, penalties for not having coverage. You know, that mandate that everybody was bitching about, that was pretty much the only good thing about the bill from a lot of people's perspectives. Not mine, because I understand why the fucking mandate is there.
The mandate makes the Affordable Care Act functional in the first place. Without having all of the healthy people signing up out of necessity, you don't get the fundage to make the risk pools make sense for the people who are older and sicker, which, again, this entire conversation is taking place in the context of we're trying to figure out a way to do this through private insurance companies, which no other major industrialized country on the face of the planet does. We're the only ones trying to figure out how to do it this way instead of going the well-traveled road that every other country takes.
Because, again, it's not like there aren't models to work off of. But here's the thing. The Senate bill, and this is a quote from The Hill, the Senate bill would make those who had a lapse in coverage for 63 days or more wait 6 months before obtaining insurance. Now, this continuous coverage provision thing wasn't originally in the Senate draft. According to The Hill, aides said they were working behind the scenes to add it. And that's basically to prevent people from just signing up for insurance when they get sick, or as they lead into it, which I get, but that's when the people need it, when they're sick. So, here's the other problem. When the CBO took a look at all of this, currently there is a mandate for employers to insure their employees if there's a certain size of company. they're still talking about dropping that mandate and that penalty, which means that, according to the CBO, something like 4 million people who have employer-provided health insurance could lose their coverage. So those of you that are thinking, well, I've got employer insurance, I don't care, I'll be fine, you may not be. And I know that from my own experience because the Iowa legislature recently fucked with the unions here, and now one of the things that we don't have any say in is insurance, which means if my employer decides, there's a lot of you and we don't want to cover you anymore, I don't have insurance.
The Republican health care bill is just the latest thing in a string of assaults on both your personal liberty and, frankly, your health. I'm rarely at a loss for words, or do I ever get seething with rage over politics anymore, just because, at a certain point you feel like you've seen it all. But this process from Mitch McConnell, this is some gangster shit. This is some really, really nasty politics that we're seeing. First, they stole a Supreme Court seat, and now they were supposed to fix the House health care bill that was going to kick 24 million people off of health care. Well, they got that down to 22 million, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And in case you're one of those people that's thinking, well, this is going to take years and years, it'll be fine, they'll get this figured out, it's not going to affect anybody right away, let me quote you one more thing from the New York Times. The CBO also found that next year, 15 million more people would be uninsured compared with the current law. That's in a 1-year period, ladies and gentlemen. Like I say, I'm not often at a loss for words, but this is one of those times that if you vote for Republicans, if you are a Republican, I have to ask you, what is it going to take? What is it going to take for you personally, whoever you are, wherever you are? What is it going to take for you to wake the fuck up and realize who you're supporting? These guys don't give a shit about anything except for what their donors tell them to give a shit about. And the way you can know that is this healthcare law was drafted completely in secret. And when I say in secret, I don't mean in some back room of the Senate. I mean the K Street lobbyists were the ones essentially writing the bill and signing off on everything. This is what the lobbyists and the donor class want. That's what we mean when we say it was drafted in secret. What is it going to take?
Well, what it's probably going to take is for somebody they actually care about to die. Or at least get sick.
Well, you'll get your shot.
I mean, let's be honest. People at this point who still support the Republicans, particularly on healthcare, are either clueless, slavishly devoted to their team, or literally don't give a fuck about anybody else but themselves without realizing that they're still fucked too. Because here's the other thing for all of you in the red states, most of which are some of the poorest in the nation.
And the most Christian. We'll come back to that in a minute.
In a Think Progress piece, well, let me just read it, it's easier. During an off-camera briefing on Monday, Press Secretary Sean Spicer signaled that the Trump administration is willing to use low-income Americans' health insurance as a bargaining chip to persuade Congress to pass Trump care. Let me repeat that. The Trump administration is willing to use low-income American health insurance as a bargaining chip to persuade Congress to pass Trump care. Now, I wouldn't say that I would be okay with it if Trump care was actually going to provide care, because I'm still not. But what you just heard me say was that he is willing to throw poor people, red staters, under the bus in order to get fucking tax cuts. Because let's stop pretending this is a healthcare bill. This is a tax cuts bill that's basically going to benefit about 400 or 500 people, ultimately.
So, if you want to know the 10 poorest states in the Union, based upon median household income, they are, starting at number 50, Mississippi, West Virginia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, New Mexico, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Idaho.
Hey, I wonder what color those states usually are.
Yeah, are you seeing a pattern here? And ladies and gentlemen, in case you don't follow politics too closely, or you don't understand the bureaucracy, or the difference between Medicaid and Medicare, Medicaid is the program that they're going to attempt to cut $800 billion from. They say that it's not going to go down. Kellyanne Conway went on Fox State TV and lied through her teeth, saying that that wasn't going to cut anything from Medicaid. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is a fact. It is going to cut $800 million from Medicaid. What is Medicaid? Medicaid covers 3 groups of people primarily: the very poor, the very old, and people with disabilities.
The most at-risk people.
These are the ones that Jesus would have probably described as the least of these. That's one of the things early on in the show we took direct aim at, was noticing that the disproportionate amount of evangelical so-called Christians that voted for Donald Trump. Well, guess what, folks? You're still on the Trump train. These are the consequences of your actions. Now, we have some good news that we're going to come to here in a moment about this healthcare bill, but I just want you to know that the people you have put in power, so-called Christians in these poor states, look what you have done.
Now, AJ just outlined some of the poorest states, most of which are red. Two of those evil liberal states, California and New York, are currently examining a single-payer system for healthcare for the people in their state. Why? Well, first of all, because they're not red states. Second of all, because they have money. Now, all of you states' rights advocates should have a giant hard-on right now because the states are telling the federal government to go fuck itself. But you don't, because it's a blue state telling a red government to go fuck itself. Here's the other thing. If that's successful, even if it's not, but if it's successful and California and New York have a single-payer system of their own that's state-operated, that's never coming to your fucking red states because you don't have any fucking money. Your state doesn't have any money, and they wouldn't take the federal fucking money.
And the money you do have, they're coming after. I mean, you have to understand this block grant scheme to the states where they're just going to give the states a certain amount of money. It's even worse than it sounds because apparently, according to the Senate bill, there are no strings attached to the money, which means if your state just faces a shortfall, they can raid that fund. Your health money, yeah, it's for health care, but the minute you have an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane, something else, the governor wants to give out some corporate tax breaks.
Here's the other thing about block grants. It doesn't even have to be a natural disaster that requires them to spend some extra money. It can be if you've got a fucking governor who decides we really need to throw more money at abstinence only because that's a healthcare related issue. Well, let's spend some money teaching kids that they should never have sex because that works out so well. One of the things you may have noticed if you look at statistics is those red states also have the highest incidence of STDs and teen pregnancies and all the other shit. So we get that you fucking hate the blue. Got it, fine. Whatever. We don't really even necessarily like the blue ourselves, but they're the only ones trying to keep you from dying. Remember that. Like the guy at the beginning. And they're coming after you, whatever. You're manly, you can take it. They're coming after your fucking family. And that's still just okay with you. Is that what you're telling us?
And what are the kids with disabilities who are probably going to see either reduced or eliminated services, including ones that allow them to access the community, including ones that pay for any devices they may need, wheelchairs, breathing devices, seizure medications? What are they supposed to do?
You know what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to fucking die. That's the point.
And the ones that showed up to protest this at Mitch McConnell's office, oh boy, that was a great graphic. I love seeing this shit in my country.
Dragging people out of their fucking wheelchairs.
Yeah, I see people handcuffed in a wheelchair. This is the America you fucking people have brought us. Look at what you've done. I'm sorry, I don't mean to heap fire and brimstone on people's heads, but man,
Because, you're right, this is the shit they brought on all of us. That's the thing I don't think you give a shit about. You thought it would be funny to fuck those liberals. Well, guess what? You're also getting fucked.
We told you the guy was a con man. We told you he was full of shit. He can't speak 2 sentences without 3 of them being a lie. And the cartel gangster mafia Republican Party that he seems so infatuated with all of a sudden, because they allow him to have power, are coming after you. What is it going to take for you guys to wake up?
Last week, I mentioned that it was only going to take 3 people to stop this fucking nightmare from happening. 3 fucking Republicans with a spine or a heart. I don't give a shit what part of them. Some part of them that enables them to stand up to their fucking party.
A sense of self-preservation would be a start, because this bill is going to, this will be the Armageddon for the party if it passes. In fact, I think it should be anyway. The very thought of it is bad enough.
At this point, we have 3 senators, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, who we mentioned, Dean Heller, who I think AJ also mentioned, and Ron Johnson. Right now, we have a surplus of 1 extra. Now, that could possibly change. But if you happen to be listening to us, if you live in any of those states, Kentucky, Maine, Nevada, or Wisconsin, now would be a really great fucking time to tell your senator, no, don't fucking do this. If you don't live in one of those states, go ahead and tell them that. Odds are they're not going to listen, because they get to kiss the red state ass and still not have to worry about it because the bill won't pass and they won't have to have done anything that makes it look like they had a spine or a heart. But I know we usually say this for the end, but Jesus fucking Christ, you got to get in touch with your senators. Frankly, if you have the wherewithal, or you're lucky lucky enough to be in a position where you can actually fucking talk directly to them, by all means, take what you need from the guy at the beginning of the show. Because these motherfuckers are trying to kill people. There's no other way around it. You can't even pretend it's for the benefit of the nation. This isn't sacrificing a bunch of young men in a war. This is sacrificing your children, your spouse, people you care about, so a handful of people who are already filthy fucking rich can get more rich. That's not trickle-down shit. It's not coming down to you. It's literally just to enrich a handful of people.
If Trump Care passes, the greatest beneficiary of Trump Care will be Trump. Not politically, personally. His own wealth will be enlarged because of the bill, which probably really makes him excited.
I can't imagine what else would, because he can't do anything else fucking right now. Speaking of how he can't do anything right, there are two things I wanted to mention with regard to that. One of them is that we've talked before about Trump's lawyer, because in case we haven't reminded you yet today, and maybe we haven't, Trump is under fucking investigation by the federal government. His lawyer has been described by Think Progress as the Donald Trump of lawyers. This is the same boathead who came out that said that Trump was under investigation, he wasn't under investigation, and he didn't know if he was under investigation. Why is he the Donald Trump of lawyers? Well, because basically, like Trump, ever since he's been in business, he's been fucking people over. He's been essentially committing financial crimes and getting away with it. And he's been profiting by abusing nonprofits, including religious ones. So, yeah, this is exactly the sort of guy you sort of envision being an ally of Donald Trump. But here's the other reason why this is the guy that Trump has representing him. Nobody else wants to fucking represent him. The president of the United fucking States can't get a good lawyer, one who wants to make his reputation, because he's an asshole. As one lawyer told Michael Isikoff, the guy doesn't pay and he won't listen. These are the two worst elements for any lawyer's client to have. And Trump has them. And nobody wants to fucking touch him because he's an awful fucking human being. The only guy he can get is another awful fucking human being. So I hope what that means is that this lawyer is as successful as a lawyer as Trump is at business, because then maybe we won't have President Trump.
Not for very much longer. And it's just, it's amazing the damage that this whole saga is doing to our image around the world. There's an article from the Washington Post that shows the international survey by the Pew Research Center found that favorability ratings in the United States have decreased from 64% of all people across all countries surveyed at the end of Barack Obama's presidency to 49% this spring. The new figures are similar to those towards the end of the George W. Bush administration.
That's somebody you want to be compared to.
And this is following a pattern of foreign leaders mocking the president, playing little pranks on him and jokes, laughing about him, doing impressions. I mean, you want to talk about being laughed at. Holy shit. Like we said a week or two ago, Donald Trump is the most mocked man in the world. And our image, because of his legislative failures and the things that he is intending to do, and his general demeanor, they have embarrassed us to the point where we're really losing our standing. I don't know how much of this is repairable. That's the big unknown. We actually don't know if we'll be able to dig ourselves out of this anytime soon.
Now, there's a Reuters article that actually references the same survey. And it says that globally, 75% of the respondents describe Trump as arrogant, 65% as intolerant, and 62% as dangerous. Now, they also mention that 55% also describe him as a strong leader. The thing to take into account is arrogant, intolerant, and dangerous, in addition to being a strong leader. That's a recipe for Putin. That's a recipe for an authoritarian. That is a recipe for a totalitarian dictator. The only thing really saving us is he's dumber than a fucking post. But some of the worst damage, according to this, as they put it in the Reuters piece, the falls were far steeper in some of America's closest allies, including, obviously, our neighbors, Mexico and Canada. Mexico, who he can't stop bad-mouthing, and Canada, who just looks down and goes, they're gonna fucking blow us up by accident. And our European partners, like Germany and Sweden. Germany, who has been our ally through everything since the end of World War II. Germany, a country led by a woman who's now essentially the de facto leader of the free world because we sort of abdicated that when we hired Trump for the job. These are collectively rational people. Not coincidentally, Canada and Germany also have healthcare systems that far outstrip what we've got. And I know for a lot of you who might be red state fans, you don't give a fuck what the rest of the world thinks about us. While I get why you think that, it doesn't help us function in the real world. Let me bring that down to a smaller level. Those of you that have jobs that you go to and actually interact with other people, everybody thinks you're an asshole. Nobody wants to work with you. Scale that shit up to a country that everybody thinks is an asshole and doesn't want to work with, and tell me why that's not going to be a problem.
And then if you want, scale it up one step further to a collection of nations facing some sort of a crisis like a war or a major natural disaster that affects an entire continent or something of that sort. And you have a person in the White House who nobody can even trust to be coherent and sensible, who lies through his teeth, just like he lied to you, Trump voter. He lied when he said he wasn't going to cut Medicare and Medicaid. He lies about everything. How are you going to trust him now if he is the one having to make a decision about whether or not to enter a war, whether we even need to? This is the cost of having an arrogant, stupid, little man pretending that he can do a job that he is in no way suited to do. He doesn't have the brains. He doesn't have it. He's weak. He's weak-minded and stupid, and nobody likes him. And when that happens, and you can't trust a person like that, you really put yourself in a dangerous position if something bad were to happen.
We live in a global economy. I don't give a shit about how much you're excited about your Made in America, America First bullshit. We live in a global economy. Even shit made in America has parts coming from somewhere else. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence in looking through this chart, the survey results, the only two countries where ratings improved compared to Obama were Russia, where the confidence in the U.S. president surged to 53% from 11%, and Israel, where it rose 7 points to 56%. Again, Russia, a jump from 11% under Obama to 53%. I wonder why that would be.
Yeah, that's a real mystery. A real mystery why Russia would be behind Donald Trump. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know, an FBI investigation will eventually divulge that answer.
Now, and this is a direct quote from the Reuters piece, quote, on the positive side, the survey showed that 58% of respondents had a positive view of Americans in general. And in many regions of the world, the majority or plurality of respondents said they expected relations with the United States to stay roughly the same, in spite of Trump. End quote.
And that's really my hope for the future. I mean, I know that, we sound a little doom and gloom, and we are heaping some coals on the heads of some voters because you guys have put us in a really tough spot. And like we said before, months and months ago, we're not going to win every battle. Unfortunately, the damage is done at a certain point when you've elected this guy and he has the policies that he has, or he has the policies that the Republicans have, even though they contradict his stated intentions on the campaign trail. We're not going to be able to stop everything. Hopefully, in the end, when all of this is through and the Trump-Russia investigation yields what I think it's going to yield, and when Trump is finally out, whether it's next year or 2 years from now, there will be a period where I think the resistance will hit back, and when that happens, we can begin to rebuild. But it's good to know that at least the world knows that a majority of Americans didn't vote for this. This isn't really what anybody wants. You have, Fox State TV, right-wing rage radio, and a group of essentially what I view as cultists. They managed to win on a technicality, and the agenda is not even theirs. The agenda is what the lobbyists and the donors of the Republican Party wish it to be, and so that is what we're going to get for the foreseeable future. But once that is over and everything ends, we will have an opportunity to show the world again that we should lead. Unfortunately, for now, we don't get to claim that, and that's one of the consequences. That's cause and effect.
Can't get enough Swing State in your life? Follow us on Twitter at SwingState_show. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/swingstateshow. Check out back episodes, our blog, and whatever other things don't fit on the podcast at swingstateshow.wordpress.com. That includes links to past episodes and individual broadsides on YouTube. If you want to send us love notes or hate mail, shoot it to swingstateshow@gmail.com. Thanks to all of you who listen, share, and comment. We really appreciate it. Now, back to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We got one more quick story we wanted to do today just because it involves the Trump-Russia probe and a certain aspect of the investigation that will probably get a little bit clearer as time goes on.
See, we didn't spend the whole episode on Trump-Russia, just a little piece of it this time.
Getting better. So this is from the Washington Post. Kushner firm's $285 million Deutsche Bank loan came just before Election Day. 1 month before Election Day, Jared Kushner's real estate company finalized a $285 million loan as a part of a refinancing package for its property near Times Square in Manhattan. The loan came at a critical moment. Kushner was playing a key role in the presidential campaign of his father-in-law, Donald Trump. The lender, Deutsche Bank, was negotiating to settle a federal mortgage fraud case and charges from New York state regulators that had aided a possible Russian money laundering scheme. The cases were settled in December and January. Now, Kushner's association with Deutsche Bank is among a number of financial matters that could come under focus as his business activities are reviewed by special counsel Robert S. Mueller, who is examining Kushner as a part of a broader investigation into possible Russian influence in the election.
I didn't want to interrupt you because you had the flow going, but I'm sorry, did you say that there were fraud cases being settled and Russian money laundering? Did those words come up in there? I thought I caught that.
They did indeed, and Deutsche Bank is one of those places that has a lot of these kinds of problems, which is interesting because Deutsche Bank has a very well-established connection with both Kushner and Trump.
You don't say.
It's just, again, every day goes by, the drip, drip, drip of details comes out. Again, a lot of these stories, taken by themselves, you'd say, well, what's the big deal? What's this? What's that?
Yeah, I've had money in Deutsche Bank, so I mean, yeah, it doesn't mean I'm involved in that sort of thing.
Who hasn't laundered, 10 or 12 million with Russian mobsters every now and again? It happens. You can't play Monopoly without doing that. But the problem is, you have a series of people with a series of highly suspicious connections, and also, all of these people are hiring lawyers to defend themselves in the investigation, which I know isn't itself, it doesn't necessitate their guilt, but it looks funny.
Well, and we've mentioned this before. If the roles were reversed, and this was Hillary, or anybody associated with her, who were doing literally the exact same thing, we wouldn't hear the end of it. It would be a constant barrage of, well, frankly, statements of guilt. They wouldn't even pretend, allegedly. Fox News would be spending 24 hours a day talking about how crooked she was. Look at this. This is obviously suspicious activity.
But if you're watching Fox News lately, and this I just find fascinating because I have been an observer of Fox either as a viewer when I was younger and dumber, and then over the years as I started to kind of come to understand the way the world works and who ran Fox News and for what purpose. It's amazing that even after Ailes was ousted and Bill O'Reilly was canned as well, and they sort of went through that whole, the extermination of the upper levels of Fox News, they are still carrying the water of the right wing as if nothing had changed. In fact, their most recent argument, Trump used to take the position that he didn't know if it was Russia or he was sure it wasn't Russia, it could have been anybody. He was trying to pretend that the entire hacking thing was just a myth.
It's a minor inconvenience at best.
Yeah. Well, now, and along with that, he continuously denied any collusion with the Russian government or of any kind or of anyone who works for him. He just flat denied that it even happened. Interestingly, in this last week, Fox has begun to put out the narrative in the argument that, well, collusion's not really a crime. I mean, he didn't do it, but collusion's not a crime. That there's not actually a statute under which that he could be prosecuted for colluding/coordinating with the Russian government. It's just fascinating because Sean Hannity, Brit Hume, and one other guy, all in like the same day, suddenly came up with this ridiculous argument.
Okay. Well, sure, there probably is not a statute specifically for collusion, but there are several of them involving conspiracy, money laundering, and if there was a quid pro quo for releasing information, say for sanctions relief, remember that one foreign policy fetish that Donald Trump has? A guy who knows
absolutely nothing about foreign policy with any country, let alone a country as complicated as Russia is. But he has one idea that he had to get into the platform, which was to ease the sanctions that were put in place after their illegal invasion of Ukraine. That was the one thing he wanted to get in there. So if it's ever proven that there was a tit for tat, that is called espionage and treason, which there are statutes for.
I guess that's the thing that sort of blows me away about this. And I didn't even allude to it. I directly said it earlier that if the roles were reversed, this would be a completely different experience. But I've mentioned before on the show that we should probably use words like allegedly more often than we do. I think we should probably just take it as a given that we're not saying any crimes specifically being committed because, of course, we don't have evidence. And certainly there's been no trial. And certainly the activity looks suspicious. But if we lay these pieces out for you, and you look at the same things that we're looking at objectively, what other conclusion do you come to? I actually am. I'm perfectly willing to hear an argument for how all of this is not what it looks like. I'd be curious to see what it is. I don't know how that works. But, if somebody could do that, that'd be great. I'd be curious to see how it works. And obviously, I am waiting for the results of the hearings. I am waiting for the results of the investigation. So I'm not actually saying Trump is guilty of treason, because that carries a lot of fucking weight. But considering how uber-patriotic the right pretends to be, I don't understand how this can't be a bigger issue. I get that the psychological block that stops you from looking at the guy that you backed and saying, oh my God, I made a mistake. I get that. People have to deal with that all the time. People coming out of religions. People coming out of political parties. I've had to do both of those things. I understand how hard it is to look at something that has been part of your makeup, part of your identity for whatever period of time. But Trump as a person has not been part of your identity all of this time. Trump as a person has not been part of your moral makeup all of this time. Maybe the party is and you're trapped within that. Fine, I get it. But if I had ever thought Hillary had ever been guilty of any of the shit that everybody accused her of, I would have been willing in a heartbeat to reject her as soundly as anybody else. Nobody ever came up with shit. Now, maybe that's the way the system works, whatever. Maybe that's how it's going to work for Trump. But because I don't have a party, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm not any of the other third-party guys who wish they could even come close. I don't have a party because I don't like the whole concept of the party. I think it makes for lazy politics, and it's part of the thing I've always had an issue with the way people are involved in sport. AJ uses sports metaphors a lot, and there's a reason for that, because you have a team that you support and a team that opposes them. Okay, that's not the type of person I am. The party doesn't matter. The team doesn't matter. What matters is what the fuck happens to this country. Not even from I'm an uber-patriotic person, but what's going to fucking happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? I don't oppose the AHCA because it's a Republican plan. I oppose the AHCA because it's probably going to kill people. And it may even be people I know. But even if it's not, it's a plan that's designed to kill people in order to make people rich. And I don't know how you can support a party that behaves that way. But if you just have to, because it's part of you, I get that. But you cannot look at Trump and think he deserves any of your support, any of your respect, any of your effort, any of your passion.
And it's amazing that, again, to return to Fox State TV, that they would so willingly pick up the most ludicrous of defenses. I think Keith Olbermann called this the doomsday defense, where it's like, no, he didn't do it, but if he did, it's not illegal. You have scraped the bottom of the barrel and your fingernails are starting to pry off because of the effort of having to scrape. There's really nothing left to defend at that point. If that's your argument, you've lost. But it's amazing to me that there are so many people who would just hurl themselves swan dive into the abyss of this unreason because it will comfort them momentarily from having to face the awful truth, which is that Trump is suspiciously connected to the Russian Federation in ways that no other politician is and never would be, for exactly the reasons that we're now finding, the suspicion that it draws because of the type of government it is. And this just goes to show that this election and this whole period of time, it's unearthed a lot of unpleasant facts about America, about Americans, about our beliefs, how we form beliefs, and frankly, our education system. I think that may be the real scandal that nobody's talking about. I always hate that phrasing. But the real scandal nobody's talking about is how so much of the country could not have the intellectual tools to detect the faintest whiff of danger from any of this, and that they could go on watching a network like Fox State TV, even after the founder was disgraced, the biggest celebrity star, Bill O'Reilly, was disgraced, several of the top executives had to be cut, one of the others left because of the sex scandals, but they just continue on as if nothing happened. It's as if yesterday didn't even exist. And that's the aspect of totalitarian societies that always scared me the most when I read about them. Nothing that happened before relates to now. The only thing is now. That's what Donald Trump is, the id, the eternal present moment. You can only deal with what's right in front of your face. So if he goes and denies any collusion or even the event of the Russian hack in the first place, if he does that for 6 months, but then on the 6th month and first day, he turns around and tweets that in fact the Russians did hack, but it was Obama's fault, no one even blinks on an entire television network. An entire segment of the country doesn't even blink. It's so dangerous. Christopher Hitchens said, if you're willing to believe something like this, you're willing to believe anything.
And apparently have.
We've got a long slog ahead to get to the 2018 elections where we can really start to roll back the damage that's being done, some of the things we've talked about today. It's going to be a while before we can all sleep easy again, I think, but until that day comes,
Organize, mobilize, protest,
vote.